Have you ever set a completely reasonable limit with your child? Something like, no more screen time, sweetie, or we're not buying that today, or it's time to leave. And suddenly, it's like a bomb went off. But what if the limit isn't causing the storm in your kid? What if it's revealing a storm that's been building up inside your kid for days? Welcome to Self Led Parenting Live. I'm Jacqueline Long, licensed marriage and family therapist, founder of Mindful Child and Family Therapy, a certified parent educator in connection parenting, and an internal family systems or IFS therapist. And each week we explore how understanding our own inner world as a parent can help us show up differently for our children. Because our kids really do benefit when we lead ourselves from a place of calm, clarity, compassion, and connection. But that's not always easy because parts of us come up in the way. And yet, as we'll discover together, what's in the way is the way. And if you're joining live, feel free to share your reflections in the comments. I really love hearing what's coming up for you. So, today we're talking about something every parent experiences. You set a limit, a completely reasonable limit, and your child becomes incredibly angry. Maybe they yell, maybe they slam the door, or they tell you that you're the worst parent ever. Maybe they say, I hate you, or you don't love me, or you love my sister more. And suddenly, bombs start going off inside of you. I'm going to introduce some of my friends from inside out here. You might have a worried part that's wondering, what just happened? Was I too strict? Was I too harsh? Should I back off the limit? And you might have an angry part that's coming out. Have I been too soft? I think I need to come on harder. Maybe I just need to be more harsh when I set limits. Or part of you might be saying something like this, that a part that might be sharing some disgust or shaming energy or self-criticism or criticism of your child might say, why is my child acting like this over something so small? What's wrong with them? And maybe also, what's wrong with me that I'm raising a kid like that? Right? And soon, there's a whole emotional storm building up inside of us as the parent in an instant. So today I'd like to offer another way, perhaps a more helpful way of looking at all of this. What if the size of the reaction in our kid isn't only about the moment at hand? What if the limit we're setting is simply revealing something that was already there, building up inside, simply seeking a safe place for release? And what if that release is something we can support instead of trying to stop? And what if by supporting that release, it leads our child to a more calm, cool, and collected state for longer and longer periods of time? Because if supported with calm confidence and steady connection, that's indeed what we find to be the case. Kids who are supported with their release, especially the big unpleasant feelings, that whole storm of feelings inside, they tend to be more relaxed for longer periods of time after. They can sit still. They can follow directions. They tend to want to help us out. It's that powerful. Last week, we talked about the emotional bladder metaphor. We used a balloon to represent the way that emotional experiences can kind of build up inside of a child over time. And one of the key ideas was this: to function well, emotional regulation is not only about holding feelings in, it's also about having a safe place to let feelings out. And guess what, parents? hopefully, that safe place is with you. Just as we need both the gas and the brakes to drive a car, we need to be able to let things out and hold things in order to have a healthy emotional bladder. So today, I'd like to revisit this idea. Imagine that your child's emotional bladder has been filling throughout the past few weeks. Maybe they felt embarrassed in class a few weeks ago. Maybe a friend excluded them at recess last week. Maybe they were corrected by a teacher earlier this morning. And maybe their sibling has been picking on them for months. Now, none of these experiences were necessarily big enough to create an emotional release on their own, but they all added a little pressure in your child's emotional bladder, creating a bit of an emotional storm inside, emotional tension. Now imagine that your child comes home from school and you say, "Nope, we're not having ice cream before dinner," or "That's all screen time for tonight," or "It's time to leave the park, sweetie." And suddenly your child screams, "You never let me do anything! I hate you! You're so mean!" In these moments, parents often assume that the limit caused this reaction and that the child can't handle a reasonable limit. So the parent either tries to back off the limit or come down even harder. The parent's essentially trying to stop the offloading process. But sometimes the limit simply touched a child whose emotional bladder was already overly full. And the best thing that parent can do is to support the release by saying, "That's it, sweetie. Keep going. Get it all out." Another metaphor I like to use, because I'm a surfer, is the ocean metaphor. So I live in California and we see waves coming towards us on the Pacific coast. And some of those waves have been traveling for miles and miles and miles. There's this tension in the wave that's there. And as a surfer, you can look out at the ocean and see those waves coming. You can literally sit and watch and see them coming towards you for miles. And we're just looking at a little bump in the ocean, but we know inside that big bump, that little bump, as it comes close to the shore, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to grow. When? When it comes up against a calm, clear, steady limit. And then it's going to start to break and get louder and bigger. And if that steady shoreline stays still, then it will release. But first it gets bigger before it releases. So you, dear parents, you can be like a steady shoreline. You can be a calm, loving limit for your child and their big emotional tension to crash up against. And you can call it miles out. You can start seeing little signals that your child has emotional tension building up inside of them, and that the best thing you can do is set a calm, loving limit to help them release. But know, it's good to know inside that as you set a calm, loving limit, your child will get more upset. Your child will get louder and bigger. And that's to be understood and predicted and accepted if you're going to support this emotional release well. That you can say yes to their feelings while saying no to the off-track behaviors, while saying no to the screen time or no to ice cream before dinner. But we just need to predict, it's helpful to predict that the emotional tension inside and the anger and the outbursts are going to get bigger before they get more relaxed. And it's also helpful to know that the safer the limit is when you set it, the steadier the shoreline, the deeper the release in the child. What's not safe is when we get upset and start to vibrate emotionally, yelling at them or getting angry at them, that's us becoming the wave and amplifying the emotional wave. What's also not safe is us becoming a shifting shoreline where we keep accommodating the child. That doesn't help them release. That just keeps the emotional tension stuck inside of them. So the safer the limit, the deeper the release. And the deeper the release, the more calm, cool, and collected, more emotionally regulated your child will be after the offloading session. After they've unburdened all of the heavy emotional burdens they've been carrying around inside. So the safer the limit, the deeper the release. And parents, this is really important to keep in mind. Limits do not need to be loud or long-winded to be effective. In fact, the warmer the tone, the fewer the words, the simpler the phrase, the more effective the limit will be. And an effective limit does not mean the absence of difficult feelings afterwards. An effective limit might lead to lots of big feelings that come tumbling out, clearing the emotional wave, so brighter feelings can follow for longer and longer periods of time. That is what over 30 years of anecdotal evidence in connection parenting has shown. And I just want to be careful here. Pardon. I'm not saying every angry reaction is evidence of a full emotional bladder. Sometimes children are simply angry about the limit, and that's okay. Children are allowed to dislike our limits. They're allowed to feel disappointed. They're allowed to wish the answer had been different. Sometimes the limit is the hard thing. And sometimes kids just go through a grief process when they bump up against natural limits. But sometimes the emotional bladder is full, and that's what makes the limit feel like a very hard thing. The invitation is to become curious about what's unfolding in them, and curious about what's unfolding inside of us as the parent. When our child becomes angry, most of us naturally focus only on the child. But as we've discussed throughout the series, one of the most powerful parenting tools a parent can use is making a U-turn. When we notice all of our attention is focused on that kid out there, we can gently turn our attention inward first and to notice what's happening inside of us. Because when our child's anger shows up out there, our own parts often show up in here too. Often, when your child gets angry, it can touch a hurt part of us inside. Imagine I tell my child, "No, we're not buying that toy today." And my child responds, "I hate you. You don't love me." I might have a part that comes up and says, "What? After everything I do for you? That's so hurtful. That's so disrespectful. I work so hard for you. I try so hard. Why would you say that to me?" Many parents have a part inside that sounds something like this. Why? Because we're human. Because being rejected hurts. Because being misperceived as someone who's mean when we're trying our best to be loving and kind can be painful. It touches tender places deep inside of us. It touches parts of us that are carrying our own wounds. And what these tender, raw, and vulnerable parts of us often need most is our own compassionate presence. So now, I'm going to invite a little space so I can be with the hurt part inside of me from my deep, wise, loving, capital S self energy, as we refer to it in IFS. Ah, yes. Something inside of me just got hurt. I'm right here with you. I'm curious about you, and I care about you. Where does it hurt? Yeah, You can tell me all about it. I'll be right here for you first, and I'll be out there for our child after that. I have enough presence for everyone, but I'll start right here with you first. Mm. One of the things I love about IFS is that it helps us understand what's happening underneath the surface, underneath the behavior. When a child says, "I hate you," a parent's hurt part often responds, "How could you say that after everything I've done for you?" And now we have parts talking to parts. A hurting child part meeting a hurting parent part. And these interactions often escalate pretty quickly because there's a powerful connection between our vulnerability and our protection, between our tender, hurt parts and the need for our internal bodyguards to rise up and protect us. So, the more we can bring self energy into these moments, the more likely we are to respond rather than react. The more likely we are to be able to connect with ourselves so we can stay connected to our kids through their emotional storms and their big emotional waves, which is honestly what they need the most from us, especially when they've flipped their lid and they're exploding with anger. And sometimes the anger is just what it looks like. Your child is angry. Other times, anger might be protecting something deeper in them. It might be protecting disappointment, embarrassment, sadness, helplessness, loneliness, or fear, or accumulated emotional tension from earlier experiences that week, that month, or even years ago. We don't have to figure it out perfectly. We don't have to become detectives. We simply have to remember that behavior is often just the tip of the iceberg of a whole emotional story beneath the surface. A story that our child probably won't be able to put into words, maybe not ever. We can know this without needing to know the whole story or every little detail of each and every feeling and how it got there. It's tempting, and our analytical parts probably want to know what they're feeling and why. But sometimes asking a child to put their feelings into words can actually add to the emotional storm that they're feeling inside because they might not be able to. We don't have to know with every little detail what they're feeling. It's just helpful to know that when we set a limit, we can predict and expect that they're going to have a big emotional offloading process if they have tension that's been building up inside. And so it's helpful to ask, what if your child's angry reaction doesn't automatically mean you're doing something wrong, that you've been too lenient or too harsh? What if your child's angry reaction doesn't mean there's something wrong with them or their ability to control themselves and their big feelings? What if, at least sometimes, it means your child feels safe enough to bring their big feelings into the space with you and into the relational field between you? Hmm. That's an honor. It doesn't mean we allow hurtful behavior. It doesn't mean there shouldn't be limits. Quite the contrary. Limits are extremely important, but we can say yes to the feelings while saying no to the off track or unwanted behavior. Setting effective limits like this requires a great deal of calm, confidence, clarity, and connection. Setting limits effectively requires a lot of self energy. So we can set a limit and listen. Listen to the big upset feelings that come tumbling out into the safety of the relationship. As Patty Whiffler from Hand in Hand Parenting says, it helps to set a warm limit and listen. Limit, listen, limit, listen. She calls this stay listening. So maybe we can stop measuring our parenting success by the absence of difficult emotions in our kids, because healthy relationships are not devoid of big feelings. In healthy relationships, we're able to stay connected when unpleasant feelings show up, including difficult feelings that arise in relation to our loving limits. Okay, parents, so here are some key takeaways, and feel free to write any of these in the chat that stand out for you or that resonate with you. Sometimes limits reveal emotional pressure that was already building up inside our kid. Our child's anger often activates our own protective parts. Self-led parenting begins with noticing our own internal reactions to their anger. And connection is about staying in relationship with one another, even when difficult feelings arise. The safer the limit, the deeper the release. And the deeper the release, the more emotionally regulated your child will be afterwards for longer periods of time. And before we close, I'd like to read you a letter written from the perspective of capital S self to the hurt parent part. Dear hurt part, I know it stings. I know it hurts when your child says things like, "You're the worst. I hate you. Leave me alone." I know there are moments when those words touch something tender inside of you. And I know another part of you immediately starts wondering whether you failed, whether you've done something wrong, whether you're losing connection. But what if your child's anger doesn't mean that you're failing? What if your child's anger means they feel safe enough to share some of their deepest, darkest, hardest feelings with you? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to stay calm every second. You don't have to get it right every time. But you can keep returning to yourself, returning to your child, returning to connection between you. The relationship is bigger than this one moment, and so are we together. Always remember that I'm here for you. I know you often feel alone as a parent, but I'm always right here for you, and you can call on me anytime you need me. I care about you deeply. Love, your capital S self. Let's take a moment to let that letter land. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with another parent who might need to hear this. And remember, if your child's feelings get bigger when you set a limit, do a U-turn. Be with your own parts first. That will help you to be with your child's very big and upset feelings about your loving limit. Set a limit and listen. Limit, listen, limit, listen. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific.